Nobody expected the quiet English teacher who always wore cardigans and spoke in whispers to have hands that could drop a grown man in 3 seconds flat. But when 17-year-old Marcus Wellington and his crew decided to turn Cassandra Mitchell into their latest viral sensation, they discovered that still waters run deeper than they ever imagined. This is the story of how a woman who hadn't thrown a punch in 15 years reminded an entire school why respect isn't optional, it's earned. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Cassandra Mitchell had been teaching at Riverside High School for 12 years, and in all that time, she had perfected the art of being invisible. At 34, she moved through the hallways like a ghost in Sensible Flats, her auburn hair always pulled back in the same modest bun, her voice barely rising above a whisper even when disciplining students. The other teachers called her Mouse behind her back, though never with malice. To them, she was simply the quiet English teacher who ate lunch alone in her classroom, grading papers while everyone else gathered in the faculty lounge. Her classroom, Room 237, sat at the end of the longest corridor in the school's east wing. The fluorescent lights flickered occasionally, casting uneven shadows across the rows of desks that she arranged in perfect symmetry each morning. Cassandra preferred it this way, tucked away from the main traffic, where she could focus on what mattered most to her: teaching literature to teenagers who mostly couldn't care less about Shakespeare or Steinbeck. But Cassandra had her reasons for keeping a low profile. 15 years ago, she had been someone entirely different. Before she became Ms. Mitchell, the soft-spoken English teacher, she had been Cassandra Lightning Rodriguez, a name that once struck fear into opponents across 3 states. The boxing world had known her as a featherweight with hands like hammers and reflexes that defied physics. She had been rising through the ranks, her record an impressive 23-2, when everything changed in a single night that she refused to think about anymore. The transition from professional athlete to high school teacher hadn't been easy. The first few years, she would catch herself automatically assessing threats, her body tensing when students raised their voices or made sudden movements. Her hands, once wrapped in leather and tape, now only held red pens and lesson plans. She had deliberately chosen a profession that would keep her far from anything resembling conflict. And for 12 years, it had worked perfectly. Marcus Wellington was the kind of student who made teachers question their career choices. At 17, he had the build of someone who spent more time in the gym than in class, with perfectly styled blonde hair and the kind of confidence that came from never facing real consequences. His father owned 3 car dealerships across the county, and Marcus never let anyone forget it. He rolled up to school each morning in a brand new Camaro, music blasting, drawing attention like a magnet. Marcus had discovered early that the easiest way to maintain his social media following was through humiliation content. His Instagram account, @MarcusWellington_official, boasted over 50,000 followers who tuned in daily to watch him embarrass teachers, classmates, and anyone else unfortunate enough to cross his path. The videos were always the same formula: find someone vulnerable, create a situation designed to maximize their embarrassment, film everything, and post it with captions designed to go viral. His crew consisted of 3 loyal followers who would do anything to stay in his good graces. Tyler Brooks, a lanky kid with acne scars and a nervous laugh, served as the designated cameraman. His phone was always ready, always recording, always looking for the next viral moment. Jessica Hartwell, a blonde junior with a mouth full of venom, specialized in the verbal attacks that would provoke the biggest reactions. And finally, there was Devin Pierce, a football player who had been kicked off the team for academic issues, but still carried himself like he owned the school. Together, they had perfected a system that had claimed 17 victims over the past 2 years. Math teachers who stammered when confronted about their personal lives, Substitute teachers who fled in tears after being recorded trying to maintain control of chaotic classrooms. Even the principal, Mr. Henderson, had found himself featured in one of Marcus's videos after being caught off guard, coming out of the bathroom with toilet paper stuck to his shoe. The school administration had tried to address the problem multiple times. Marcus's parents had been called in for conferences that went nowhere. His father, Robert Wellington, was a master at deflection, always ready with explanations about boys being boys and harmless pranks. His mother, Patricia, seemed more concerned about her son's social media success than any damage he might be causing to his victims. The family's substantial donations to the school's athletic program certainly didn't hurt Marcus's position either. For weeks, Marcus had been studying Cassandra Mitchell, looking for the perfect angle of attack. She was different from his usual targets, quieter, more withdrawn, seemingly unaware of his existence. Most teachers either feared him or tried to curry favor with him, but Ms. Mitchell treated him with the same polite indifference she showed everyone else. It was infuriating and intriguing at the same time. The opportunity finally presented itself on a Tuesday morning in October. Cassandra had been rushing to get to her first period class when she realized she had forgotten her coffee mug in her car. The October air was crisp, and she had thrown on the first jacket she could find, an old boxing gym hoodie that she hadn't worn in years. It was faded and worn, with Rodriguez Boxing Academy barely visible across the chest, but it was warm and comfortable. She made the trip to the parking lot quickly, retrieving her ceramic mug from the passenger seat where she had left it during her morning routine. The parking lot was mostly empty at this hour, with only a few early arriving students scattered across the asphalt. She was walking back toward the building when she heard the familiar sound of Marcus's Camaro pulling into the lot, music thumping loud enough to rattle windows. Marcus spotted her immediately. There was something different about her appearance. The hoodie was unlike anything he had ever seen her wear, and for the first time since he had known her, she looked almost normal, human, vulnerable in a way that made his content creator instincts kick into high gear. "Tyler," Marcus called out as he climbed from his car, never taking his eyes off Cassandra. "Get the camera ready. I think we just found our next star." Tyler fumbled with his phone, quickly switching to video mode as Jessica and Devin gathered around Marcus. They had developed a sixth sense for these moments, and they could practically smell the viral potential in the air. "What's the play?" Jessica asked, her voice filled with the same excitement that a hunter might feel when spotting prey. Marcus watched as Cassandra walked toward the building, her head down, completely unaware of the attention she had attracted. "Look at her," he said, pointing toward the faded hoodie. "Boxing Academy? Mouse Mitchell thinks she's tough. This is going to be perfect." The plan formed quickly in Marcus's mind. It was simple, elegant, and designed for maximum humiliation. He would approach her in the hallway, in front of as many students as possible, and challenge her to demonstrate her boxing skills. The quiet English teacher would be mortified, would stammer and make excuses, and would provide exactly the kind of content that his followers craved. The contrast between her soft-spoken classroom persona and the tough girl image suggested by her hoodie would be comedy gold. Marcus had no way of knowing that the woman he was targeting had once knocked out a former Olympic medalist in a sparring session that had become legendary in underground boxing circles. He couldn't have imagined that beneath those sensible cardigans and whispered words lay reflexes that had been honed by years of professional training, and muscles that still remembered every combination she had ever thrown. As Cassandra disappeared through the main entrance, Marcus felt the familiar rush of anticipation that came before each of his viral victories. He had built his reputation on the humiliation of others, and he was confident that the quiet English teacher would be his easiest target yet. The morning passed slowly for Marcus, each class period dragging as he mentally rehearsed his approach. He had decided to make his move during the lunch period, when the hallways would be crowded with students eager to witness whatever drama was about to unfold. The timing had to be perfect enough of an audience to ensure maximum viral potential, but not so many authority figures that he would face immediate consequences. Jessica spent the morning spreading subtle hints about something big happening. At lunch, building anticipation among their social circle without revealing too many details. Devon focused on crowd management, identifying the best location for maximum visibility while ensuring they would have multiple escape routes if things went sideways. Tyler, meanwhile, obsessively checked his phone's battery level and storage space, making sure he would be ready to capture every moment of what they were calling Operation Mousetrap. Cassandra, meanwhile, went about her day completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She taught her morning classes with the same quiet competence she brought to everything, helping students navigate the complexities of To Kill a Mockingbird and the subtleties of essay structure. During her prep period, she graded papers and updated her lesson plans, the faded boxing hoodie still draped over her shoulders like a ghost from her past. The lunch bell rang at 12:15, and the hallways quickly filled with the usual chaos of 700 teenagers suddenly released from their morning classes. Marcus positioned himself strategically near the main stairwell, where foot traffic was heaviest, and where his confrontation would have the largest possible audience. Cassandra typically spent her lunch period in her classroom, but today she needed to make a quick trip to the main office to drop off some attendance sheets. She moved through the crowded hallway with her usual quiet efficiency, nodding politely to colleagues and students while keeping her eyes focused on her destination. That's when Marcus made his move. "Hey, Ms. Mitchell," he called out, his voice carrying over the general din of lunchtime conversation. "Nice hoodie. Rodriguez Boxing Academy. That's pretty hardcore for an English teacher." The hallway began to quiet as students sensed the shift in atmosphere. Marcus had a reputation, and when he started talking loudly to a teacher, it usually meant entertainment was about to begin. Phones started appearing in hands, and conversations trailed off as attention focused on the developing situation. Cassandra turned toward the voice, her expression polite but guarded. She recognized Marcus. Of course, every teacher in the building knew Marcus Wellington, but she had never had any significant interaction with him. He wasn't in any of her classes, and she made it a point to avoid unnecessary confrontations with problem students. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, her voice barely audible above the residual chatter. "Is there something I can help you with?" Marcus grinned, sensing opportunity in her subdued response. This was exactly the kind of meek reaction he had been hoping for. Tyler was already filming, capturing every moment as Marcus stepped closer to his target. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "I was just wondering," Marcus continued, his voice growing louder and more theatrical, "if you could show us some of those boxing moves. I mean, you're wearing the shirt, right? Must be pretty tough to represent like that." A circle had formed around them now, students pressing closer to get a better view of whatever was about to happen. Some were already recording on their own phones, sensing that this was going to be one of Marcus's more memorable performances. Cassandra felt the familiar tightness in her chest that she always experienced when she found herself the center of attention. This was exactly the kind of situation she had spent 12 years trying to avoid. Her instinct was to deflect, to make a quiet excuse, and remove herself from the situation as quickly as possible. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wellington, but I really need to get to the main office," she said, taking a step toward the exit. But Marcus wasn't finished. He had an audience now, and he could practically feel the viral potential building around him. "Come on, Ms. Mitchell, just one little demonstration. Show us what you've got." The circle of students pressed closer, some laughing, others recording, all waiting to see how this would play out. Jessica added her voice to the chorus. "Yeah, Ms. Mitchell, don't be shy. Let's see those famous boxing skills. Devin stepped forward, his bulk adding an intimidating presence to the group. What's wrong, Teach? All talk and no action? Cassandra felt something shift inside her chest, a familiar sensation that she hadn't experienced in 15 years. It started as a flutter, like a butterfly trying to escape from a cage, but it quickly grew into something more substantial. Something that reminded her of who she used to be, before she became the quiet English teacher who ate lunch alone in room 237. The crowd was getting larger, more animated. Students were calling out encouragement to Marcus, laughing at his jokes, treating the entire situation like a form of entertainment. And in that moment, Cassandra realized that this wasn't going to end with a polite excuse and a quick exit. Marcus Wellington had made a choice, and now she was going to have to make one too. For the first time in 12 years, Cassandra Mitchell allowed herself to remember what it felt like to be Lightning Rodriguez. The memories came flooding back like water through a broken dam. Cassandra stood in that hallway, surrounded by teenagers with their phones pointed at her like weapons. And suddenly she was 22 years old again, standing in the center ring at the Phoenix Convention Center. The crowd roar. The hot lights. The moment right before her opponent realized they had made a terrible mistake. Lightning Rodriguez had been born in a gym that smelled of sweat, leather, and dreams deferred. Her father, Miguel Rodriguez, had been a middleweight boxer in the 70s who never quite made it to the top, but understood the science of fighting better than anyone she had ever met. When 8-year-old Cassandra first walked into Rodriguez Boxing Academy, she had been running from neighborhood bullies, who thought a skinny girl with thick glasses made an easy target. Miguel had taken one look at his daughter's split lip and torn shirt and made a decision that would change both their lives forever. "Mia," he had said, wrapping her small hands in tape for the first time, "nobody will ever hurt you again if you don't let them." The lessons had started: simple basic footwork, how to throw a proper jab, how to keep her guard up. But Miguel quickly realized that his daughter had something special. Her reflexes were otherworldly, her ability to read an opponent's intentions almost supernatural. By the time she was 16, amateur fighters twice her size were refusing to spar with her. The professional debut came at 18. Lightning Rodriguez. They called her because her combinations came in flashes that opponents never saw coming. The boxing world took notice when she knocked out Maria Gonzalez, a veteran with 30 professional fights, in the second round of what was supposed to be a tune-up match for the older fighter. But success in boxing came with a price that Cassandra hadn't been prepared to pay. The attention, the pressure, the constant scrutiny of every aspect of her life. And then there was the night that ended it all, a fight against Isabella, the Ice Queen Petrosky, that had gone horribly wrong when Isabella's corner had been caught doctoring her gloves with an illegal substance. The controversy, the investigations, the way the Boxing Commission had initially tried to pin the blame on Cassandra, instead of addressing the real corruption. She had walked away from it all the next day, hung up her gloves, enrolled in college, and decided that Cassandra Mitchell, the English teacher, was a safer person to be than Lightning Rodriguez, the boxer. For 15 years, she had buried that part of herself so deep that sometimes she forgot it had ever existed, until now. Marcus was still talking, his voice getting louder and more theatrical as he played to his growing audience. "Come on, Teach, don't leave us hanging. One little punch. Show us what Rodriguez Boxing Academy taught you." Tyler was moving around the circle now, getting different angles, making sure he captured the full scope of what he assumed would be Cassandra's humiliation. Jessica was live streaming on her own account, providing commentary for her followers. "Oh my God, you guys, Marcus is about to totally destroy Ms. Mitchell. This is going to be so epic." Devin had positioned himself behind Cassandra, not quite blocking her exit, but making it clear that leaving wouldn't be as simple as walking away. The circle of students had grown to nearly 50 people, with more arriving every moment as word spread through the building that something big was happening in the main hallway. Principal Henderson was in his office, completely unaware of the situation developing just 50 yards from his door. The cafeteria monitors were dealing with a food fight that had broken out near the lunch line. The school resource officer was in the parking lot, writing up a student for smoking behind the gymnasium. For the moment, Marcus and his crew had the stage entirely to themselves. "Tell you what," Marcus said, his grin growing wider as he sensed victory approaching. "I'll make it easy for you. Just throw one punch. Doesn't have to connect or anything. Just show us you're not all talk." The laughter from the crowd was getting louder now, more confident. Students were starting to call out their own suggestions. "Do it, Miss Mitchell. Show us what you got. Come on, boxer lady." Cassandra felt the last of her carefully constructed walls crumbling. She had spent 15 years perfecting the art of invisibility, of avoiding confrontation, of being small and quiet and forgettable. But Marcus Wellington had decided she didn't deserve that luxury anymore. He had chosen to drag her into his world of public humiliation and viral entertainment, and he had made that choice without knowing who he was really dealing with. "Mr. Wellington," she said, and for the first time, her voice carried clearly across the hallway. It wasn't the whisper that students were used to hearing in room 237. This voice had authority, had weight, had the kind of quiet confidence that made people stop talking and pay attention. Marcus noticed the change immediately, but he misinterpreted it as fear. In his experience, when teachers started speaking more formally, it meant they were getting nervous, preparing to back down. "Yeah, Ms. Mitchell. Are you absolutely certain? You want me to throw a punch?" The question hung in the air for a moment, and something in Cassandra's tone made several students in the back of the crowd exchange uncertain glances. But Marcus was too committed now, too invested in the performance to recognize the warning. "Absolutely," he said, stepping closer. "One punch, right here, right now. Show everyone what Rodriguez Boxing Academy was all about." Tyler zoomed in with his phone, making sure he captured Cassandra's face for the moment when she would inevitably back down, stammer out an excuse, and provide the exact content that Marcus's followers expected. Jessica was practically bouncing with excitement, already composing the caption she would use when they posted the video. Cassandra nodded slowly, as if she was considering the request carefully. Then she did something that surprised everyone in that hallway. She smiled. It wasn't the polite, restrained smile that teachers used when dealing with difficult students. It was something else entirely confident, almost predatory, like a chess player who had just realized that their opponent had walked directly into a trap. "All right, Mr. Wellington," she said, beginning to remove the faded boxing hoodie. Underneath, she wore a simple white blouse, but as she moved, the students closest to her began to notice things they had never seen before. The way her shoulders moved with fluid precision. The unconscious boxer's stance she fell into as she set the hoodie aside. The muscles in her forearms that had been hidden beneath loose sleeves and conservative clothing. "But I need to establish some ground rules first," she continued, her voice remaining calm and controlled even as the energy in the hallway shifted dramatically. "You asked for a demonstration, and I'm happy to provide one. But I want to make sure everyone understands what they're asking for." Marcus was beginning to sense that something had changed, but his ego wouldn't let him back down now. Not with 50 students watching, not with everything being recorded, not when he was so close to what he assumed would be another viral victory. Whatever, teach. Just throw the punch already. What happened next would be replayed on social media platforms across the country within hours, analyzed and dissected by boxing experts and casual viewers alike. But for the students standing in that hallway, it was like watching magic happen. In real time, Cassandra didn't wind up. She didn't telegraph her intentions. She didn't do any of the dramatic, obvious things that people expect when they think about throwing a punch. Instead, she simply shifted her weight slightly, rotated her hip a few degrees, and let 15 years of muscle memory take over. The jab traveled exactly 18 inches, from her right shoulder to a point in the air about 6 inches from Marcus's nose. It was lightning fast, so fast that Tyler's phone camera couldn't quite capture the full motion, recording instead a blur that seemed to appear and disappear in the same frame. But what made the moment truly spectacular wasn't the speed of the punch, it was the sound. The sharp crack of displaced air, the whistle of wind moving through her knuckles, the subtle whoosh that only came from a perfectly thrown punch delivered by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. Marcus jerked backward so violently that he stumbled into Devon, who caught him before he could fall. The confidence drained from his face like water from a broken glass, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like genuine fear. The hallway went completely silent. 50 teenagers who had been laughing and joking and recording suddenly found themselves witnessing something that none of them had expected. This wasn't the quiet English teacher they thought they knew. This was someone else entirely, someone dangerous, someone who moved with the kind of casual precision that spoke of years of professional training. That, Cassandra said, her voice still perfectly calm, was a jab. Thrown at about 30% power, pulled 6 inches short of its target. In a professional bout, it would have been used to set up a cross like this. The second demonstration came even faster than the first. This time, she threw a left-handed punch that cut through the air with surgical precision, stopping just short of where Marcus's temple would have been if he hadn't already backed up another 3 steps. The cross comes from the backhand, she explained, as if she were teaching a literature class instead of providing an impromptu boxing lesson. It's where most of the knockout power comes from. Proper technique involves hip rotation, weight transfer, and precise timing. Tyler was still recording, but his hands were shaking now. This wasn't going according to script. This wasn't how these situations were supposed to unfold. Marcus was supposed to be the aggressor, the one in control, the one providing entertainment. For their social media empire, Jessica had stopped her live stream, suddenly unsure whether she wanted her followers to see what was happening. The comments that had been flooding in, mostly variations of "destroy her, Marcus, and this is going to be hilarious," had taken on a different tone as viewers began to realize that something unexpected was occurring. "Now," Cassandra continued, taking a small step forward, "you also asked about the Rodriguez Boxing Academy. I assume you'd like some background on that as well?" Marcus opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He was beginning to understand that he had made a catastrophic error in judgment, but he wasn't sure how to extract himself from the situation without losing face in front of his audience. "The Rodriguez Boxing Academy," Cassandra said, her voice taking on the same tone she used when discussing classic literature, "was founded by my father in 1987. It produced 12 professional fighters, 6 regional champions, and 1 fighter who was ranked in the top 10 in her weight class for 3 consecutive years." She paused, letting that information sink in while the crowd of students tried to process what they were hearing. "That fighter," she continued, "was known professionally as Lightning Rodriguez. She had a record of 23 wins, 2 losses, with 18 knockouts. She was considered a rising star in the featherweight division until she retired unexpectedly at the age of 24. The silence in the hallway was absolute now. Even the background noise from the cafeteria seemed muted, as if the entire school was holding its breath. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out as barely more than a whisper. "You're Lightning Rodriguez?" Cassandra nodded, and for a moment, the mask of the quiet English teacher slipped completely away. Standing in that hallway, surrounded by teenagers who had expected to witness her humiliation, she looked exactly like what she was, a professional fighter who had simply been pretending to be something else. "I was," she said. "And while I haven't competed professionally in 15 years, I can assure you that the skills don't just disappear. They require maintenance, certainly, but the fundamentals remain solid." To demonstrate her point, she threw a combination that lasted less than 2 seconds, but included 6 different punches, each one thrown with textbook precision, and stopped, just short of making contact with the air in front of her. The speed was inhuman, or rather, it was human performance pushed to its absolute limits by someone who had dedicated years of her life to perfecting the art of controlled violence. The crowd of students began to back away instinctively. Finally, understanding that they weren't watching a pathetic teacher being humiliated by the school bully. They were watching a predator who had been cornered by prey that didn't understand the difference. Devon, who prided himself on being the muscle of Marcus's operation, took several steps backward until he bumped into the lockers. Jessica clutched her phone with white knuckles, no longer thinking about social media content, but instead wondering how quickly she could delete any evidence of her involvement in this disaster. Tyler kept filming, but his role had changed from documentarian of Marcus's triumph to unwitting recorder of his complete and utter defeat. "Now then, Mr. Wellington," Cassandra said, her voice returning to its usual quiet tone, but retaining an edge that hadn't been there before. "I believe you wanted a demonstration of my boxing skills. Are you satisfied with what you've seen, or would you like me to continue?" Marcus Wellington had built his entire identity around being the apex predator of Riverside High School. For 2 years, he had terrorized students and teachers alike, turning their pain into profit through his social media empire. But standing in that hallway, watching Cassandra Mitchell move with the fluid grace of a professional fighter, he experienced something completely foreign to his privileged existence: genuine fear. I think we're good," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking slightly as he tried to maintain some semblance of control over the situation. That was educational. But Cassandra wasn't finished. She had spent 15 years running from confrontation, 15 years allowing people to walk over her, 15 years pretending to be someone she wasn't. Marcus had forced her hand, and now she was going to make sure he understood exactly what that meant. "All but we've only scratched the surface," she said, her tone remaining conversational while her eyes held the cold intensity of someone who had faced down opponents in professional rings. "You see, Mr. Wellington, boxing isn't just about throwing punches. It's about reading your opponent, understanding their weaknesses, exploiting their mistakes." She began to circle him slowly, and Marcus found himself turning to keep her in sight. Like a deer tracking a circling wolf, the crowd of students pressed back further, creating a wider circle as they sensed the shift in power dynamics. "For instance," Cassandra continued, "your stance tells me you've never been in a real fight. Your weight is distributed incorrectly, your guard is non-existent, and you're telegraphing your nervousness through your body language. In a professional bout, the fight would be over before it began." Tyler's phone was still recording, but he was no longer focused on capturing Marcus's triumph. Instead, he found himself documenting what appeared to be a masterclass in psychological warfare delivered by someone who had transformed from mouse to lioness in the span of minutes. Jessica tried to inject herself back into the situation, hoping to salvage something from the disaster. "Miss Mitchell, this is getting kind of intense. Maybe we should all just—" "Ms. Hartwell," Cassandra interrupted, turning her attention to the blonde junior without breaking her circling pattern around Marcus. "You've been live-streaming this encounter to your followers, haven't you?" Jessica's face went pale. "I know I stopped streaming. But you recorded the earlier portions. The parts where you and your friends were attempting to humiliate me for your entertainment." It wasn't a question. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Jessica realized she had walked into a trap she didn't understand. Cassandra's voice remained calm, but there was something underneath it that made the temperature in the hallway seem to drop several degrees. "Here's what's going to happen," Cassandra said, finally stopping her circling motion to face the group directly. "Mr. Brooks, you're going to hand me your phone. Ms. Hartwell, you're going to do the same. Mr. Pierce, I assume you were also recording? Devon shook his head quickly, but his eyes betrayed him. Cassandra had spent years reading opponents' tailies, and teenage deception was elementary compared to the mind games of professional boxing. All of you, phones now. The authority in her voice was absolute. This wasn't a request from the quiet English teacher they thought they knew. This was a command from someone who was accustomed to being obeyed without question. One by one, they complied. Tyler handed over his phone with shaking hands. Jessica followed suit, her usual defiance replaced by something approaching terror. Devon produced his device reluctantly, suddenly understanding that his physical advantage meant nothing against someone who had been trained to neutralize bigger, stronger opponents. Cassandra collected the phones efficiently, her movements precise and controlled. She scrolled through Tyler's recent videos, finding several that featured other students being humiliated for Marcus's entertainment. Her expression darkened with each clip she viewed. "Fascinating," she said, holding up Tyler's phone so the crowd could see the screen. "It appears you've built quite a library of other people's pain. Mr. Wellington, Mrs. Patterson crying after you ambushed her about her divorce. Mr. Garcia, fleeing his classroom after you convinced half the school to film him during a panic attack. Very impressive work." Marcus tried to find his voice. "Look, Ms. Mitchell, we can work this out. We don't have to make this into a big thing." "Oh, but it's already a big thing," Cassandra replied, pocketing the phones. "You made it a big thing the moment you decided to target me for your little social media circus. The question now is how we proceed from here." She moved closer to Marcus, close enough that he could see the calculating intelligence in her eyes. The same look that had intimidated opponents across 3 states during her professional career. "You have 2 choices, Mr. Wellington. Choice number 1, I report this incident to Principal Henderson, along with all the evidence I've just collected from your friends' phones. I explain how you've been running a systematic harassment campaign against students and faculty, using social media to amplify and monetize their humiliation. I provide documentation of every victim, every incident, every dollar you've earned from their pain." Marcus's face had gone completely white now. His father's money and influence could protect him from a lot of things, but a documented pattern of harassment with video evidence would be impossible to spin or deflect. "What's choice number 2? He asked, though his voice suggested he wasn't sure he wanted to know. Cassandra smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Choice number 2 is much simpler. You face me in the school gymnasium, one-on-one, with the same audience you wanted for my humiliation. Except this time, the cameras will be recording your education instead of my embarrassment." The crowd of students exchanged glances, uncertain whether they were witnessing a teacher's breakdown or the most epic confrontation in Riverside High School history. The idea of Marcus Wellington, the untouchable social media king, challenged to an actual fight by the quiet English teacher, seemed too surreal to process. "You can't be serious," Marcus said, though the tremor in his voice suggested he was beginning to understand just how serious she was. "I'm completely serious," Cassandra replied. "You wanted to see boxing skills, Mr. Wellington. You wanted to create content around my supposed martial arts abilities. I'm simply offering to give you exactly what you asked for, with the same audience and the same cameras you intended to use for my humiliation." Devon finally found his voice. "You can't fight a student. You're a teacher." Cassandra turned to face him with the same predatory smile. "Mr. Pierce, I think you'll find that student-teacher relationships have certain boundaries during school hours and in academic settings. But what you're describing would be more accurately classified as a sporting exhibition between consenting participants. Perfectly legal, assuming both parties agree to the terms." She was right, and everyone in that hallway knew it. The school had boxing equipment in the gymnasium, left over from when they had briefly offered it as an after-school program. If both participants consented to a supervised match, there would be no legal issues, just a social media spectacle, unlike anything Riverside High School had ever witnessed. "I need time to think about it," Marcus said, desperation creeping into his voice. "Of course you do," Cassandra replied. "Take all the time you need. You have until the end of the school day to decide. Choice 1. Face the consequences of your actions through official channels. Choice 2. Face them in the ring." She handed the phones back to their owners, but not before making it clear that she had screenshot the relevant videos and uploaded them to her own cloud storage. "Insurance," she explained pleasantly. "Oh, and Mr. Wellington?" she added as she picked up her boxing hoodie and began to put it back on. "You might want to spend some time this afternoon researching Lightning Rodriguez. YouTube has several of my professional fights available for viewing. I'd recommend starting with the bout against Carmen Delgado. That's probably the most instructive for someone in your position." With that, she walked away, leaving Marcus and his crew standing in the hallway surrounded by 50 students, who had just witnessed the complete dismantling of the school's most feared bully. The quiet English teacher had vanished, replaced by someone who moved with the confidence of a predator, who had just established dominance over her territory. As Cassandra disappeared around the corner, heading toward the main office to finally deliver her attendance sheets, the hallway erupted. In conversations, students pulled out their phones, searching frantically for information about Lightning Rodriguez. Social media feeds exploded with speculation about what had just happened and what might happen next. Marcus stood in the center of it all, his usual confidence shattered, facing the first real choice he had ever been forced to make. For the first time in his life, running to his father for protection wasn't an option. This was between him and the woman he had tried to humiliate, and she had just offered him a chance to save face the only way possible, by stepping into the ring with a professional fighter who had been waiting 15 years for someone to give her a reason to remember who she used to be. The bell rang, signaling the end of lunch period, but nobody moved. They were all too busy processing what they had witnessed and wondering whether Marcus Wellington would be brave enough or foolish enough to accept Cassandra Mitchell's challenge. The news spread through Riverside High School like wildfire in a drought-stricken forest. By the time the final bell rang at 3:15, every student in the building knew about the confrontation between Marcus Wellington and Miss Mitchell. But more importantly, they knew about the challenge that had been issued and the impossible choice that Marcus now faced. Word had leaked beyond the school walls as well. Screenshots of Tyler's recordings were circulating on Instagram, TikTok, and Snapchat. Local high school students from neighboring districts were sharing the videos, adding their own commentary and speculation. The hashtag Lightning Rodriguez was trending in their county, with boxing fans and curious teenagers alike searching for information about the mysterious English teacher who had apparently been hiding a professional fighting career. Marcus spent his afternoon classes in a state of psychological paralysis. In a P history, he stared blankly at his textbook while his mind raced through increasingly desperate scenarios. Could his father's lawyers find some way to stop this? Could he transfer schools before anyone noticed? Could he somehow make this entire situation disappear through sheer force of will and family money? But every plan he conceived crumbled under the weight of reality. The videos were already out there, beyond his control. His reputation as the school's alpha predator had been shattered in front of 50 witnesses. And somewhere in the building, Cassandra Mitchell was going about her day as if she hadn't just turned his entire world upside down. Jessica found him after 6th period, her usual confidence replaced by nervous energy. "Marcus, we need to talk about damage control. My followers are asking questions I don't know how to answer. Half of them think this is some kind of elaborate prank, and the other half are calling you out for picking on teachers." "Not now, Jess," Marcus muttered, shouldering his backpack with uncharacteristic weariness. "What do you mean, not now?" This is crisis management time. We need to get ahead of this story before it completely spirals out of control. Marcus turned to face her, and Jessica was startled by what she saw in his eyes. The arrogant certainty that had defined him for as long as she had known him was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like genuine fear. "You saw her, right?" he asked quietly. "You saw what she did in that hallway?" Jessica nodded reluctantly. She had indeed seen it, and it had shaken her more than she was willing to admit. The transformation from quiet teacher to predatory fighter had been so complete, so immediate, that it felt like watching someone literally become a different person. "She's not bluffing," Marcus continued. "Lightning Rodriguez was real. I spent my study hall looking her up. 23 wins, 18 knockouts. There are YouTube videos of her fights, Jessica. She knocked out women who were bigger and stronger than me without breaking a sweat." Tyler appeared beside them, his face pale and his hands shaking slightly. "Marcus, dude, we have a problem. My dad saw the videos. He's asking questions about why I was recording a teacher without permission. And get this, he recognized her name from somewhere. He thinks he might have seen her fight in Phoenix back in the day." Devin joined the group, his usual swagger notably absent. "My mom's making me delete all the videos. Says if any of this comes back on the family, she's sending me to military school. But here's the thing, people have already downloaded copies. This isn't going away." The four of them stood in the emptying hallway, surrounded by the lockers and bulletin boards that had been the backdrop for their social media empire, suddenly understanding that their reign of terror was over. The question now was how much damage they would suffer in its collapse. "So what are you going to do?" Jessica asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of a decision that would define the rest of his high school career. He could choose option 1, face Principal Henderson, deal with the official consequences, probably get suspended or expelled, and spend the rest of his life knowing that he had backed down from a challenge in front of the entire school. His social media following would evaporate, his reputation would be destroyed, and he would become the cautionary tale that future bullies used to remind themselves not to pick fights they couldn't win. Or he could choose option 2, "I'm going to fight her," he said quietly. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Tyler actually took a step backward, as if proximity to the decision might somehow implicate him in its consequences. "Marcus, that's insane," Jessica whispered. "She's a professional fighter. She'd destroy you." "She's going to destroy me either way," Marcus replied with a bitter laugh. "At least this way, I go down swinging. Maybe I will get lucky. Maybe she's rusty after 15 years. Maybe I land one good shot and turn this whole thing around." Devin shook his head slowly. "Dude, I've seen her move. Lucky isn't going to be enough." But Marcus had made his choice, and once Robert Wellington's son decided on a course of action, he committed completely. "Text everyone. Spread the word. Tomorrow after school, gymnasium. Tell them Lightning Rodriguez is coming out of retirement. For one night only." Meanwhile, in room 237, Cassandra was grading essays on The Great Gatsby as if this had been a perfectly ordinary Tuesday. Her red pen moved across the papers with the same methodical precision she brought to everything else, noting grammatical errors and praising insightful observations about Fitzgerald's commentary on the American Dream, but anyone who looked closely might have noticed that her handwriting was steadier than usual, her movements more controlled. The confrontation with Marcus had awakened something that had been dormant for 15 years, and she could feel it stirring beneath the surface of her carefully constructed teacher persona. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her sister, Maria, who lived in Phoenix. "Girl, someone just sent me a video of you looking like you're about to murder some high school kid. Please tell me you haven't completely lost your mind." Cassandra smiled as she typed back, "Just handling a workplace situation." Nothing I can't manage. Workplace situation? You looked like you were back in the ring with Isabella Petrosky. Dad's been calling me all afternoon, asking if I knew you were still fighting. The mention of her father sent a complex wave of emotions through Cassandra's chest. Miguel Rodriguez had never understood her decision to walk away from boxing. He had spent years building her into a championship-caliber fighter, only to watch her abandon it all overnight. Their relationship had never fully recovered from that choice. Another text arrived. This one from an unknown number. Ms. Mitchell, this is Marcus Wellington. I've made my decision. Tomorrow after school, gymnasium. I accept your challenge. Cassandra stared at the message for a long moment, trying to process the mixture of anticipation and concern that it triggered. Part of her, the part that had been Lightning Rodriguez, was eager for the confrontation. After 15 years of backing down from every conflict, of making herself small and invisible, the prospect of stepping back into a ring was intoxicating. Another part of her, the part that had become a teacher because she wanted to help young people rather than hurt them, wondered if she had pushed things too far. Marcus Wellington was a bully and a predator, but he was also 17 years old. Was she really prepared to potentially injure a teenager to prove a point about respect? She set down her red pen and walked to the small mirror she kept on her desk for checking her appearance before parent conferences. The woman looking back at her was someone she barely recognized, still quiet, still reserved, but with something dangerous flickering behind her eyes. Tomorrow would answer a lot of questions. It would determine whether Lightning Rodriguez had truly been buried beneath 15 years of lesson plans and faculty meetings, or whether she had simply been waiting for the right moment to resurface. It would show Marcus Wellington and every other bully in the building that actions had consequences, even for rich kids who thought their parents' money made them untouchable. Most importantly, it would finally answer the question that Cassandra had been avoiding for a decade and a half. Who was she really? The quiet English teacher who ate lunch alone in room 237, or the professional fighter who had once been considered one of the most dangerous women in her weight class? As she packed up her papers and prepared to leave for the day, Cassandra made a mental note to stop by the athletic department and check on the condition of the boxing equipment. If she was going to do this, if she was really going to step back into the ring after 15 years, she was going to do it right. Marcus Wellington had asked for a demonstration of her boxing skills. Tomorrow he was going to get exactly what he had requested, and Cassandra suspected it would be a lesson he would remember for the rest of his life. Wednesday morning arrived at Riverside High School with an electric tension that seemed to permeate every hallway, classroom, and conversation. Students who normally barely spoke to each other were huddled together, sharing theories and speculation about the evening's upcoming event. Teachers noticed the distracted energy but couldn't quite pinpoint its source, unaware that their quiet colleague from room 237 had become the center of the most anticipated confrontation in school history. Marcus arrived at school in his Camaro as usual, but something fundamental had changed. The confident swagger that had characterized his every movement for years was gone, replaced by the rigid posture of someone carrying an enormous weight. He had spent the previous night researching Lightning Rodriguez until his eyes burned, watching grainy YouTube footage of her professional fights with a mixture of fascination and growing dread. The Carmen Delgado fight that Cassandra had recommended proved to be particularly instructive. Lightning Rodriguez had been the underdog, facing a veteran fighter with twice her professional experience. For the first round, she had absorbed punishment, studying her opponent's patterns, learning her rhythms. Then, in the second round, she exploded into action with a combination that lasted exactly 4 seconds and ended with Delgado unconscious on the canvas. What terrified Marcus most wasn't the knockout itself. It was the cold calculation visible in Lightning's eyes throughout the fight. This wasn't someone who fought with emotion or anger. This was a technician, a problem solver who happened to solve problems with her fists. The school day dragged with surreal normalcy. Classes proceeded as scheduled, assignments were given, tests were taken. But underneath the routine, anticipation built like pressure in a sealed container. Students texted constantly, sharing updates and rumors. Some claimed that professional boxing promoters had somehow gotten word of the match. Others insisted that local news stations were planning to cover it. In room 237, Cassandra taught her morning classes with her usual quiet competence, but students noticed subtle differences. Her voice carried more authority than usual. Her movements were more precise, more purposeful. When she wrote on the whiteboard, her handwriting showed the kind of controlled precision that came from someone whose hands were trained weapons. During her lunch break, Cassandra made her way to the gymnasium for the first time in 12 years. The space was larger than she remembered, with bleachers that could seat nearly 500 people. The boxing equipment sat in a corner, covered by tarps and apparently untouched since the program had been discontinued. She pulled back the covers to reveal 2 heavy bags, a speed bag, and a small collection of gloves in various sizes. Everything was old but functional, maintained by the school's athletic department, even though no one had used it in years. She tested the heavy bag with a few light jabs, feeling the familiar resistance, hearing the distinctive sound that brought back memories of countless training sessions. Athletic Director Frank Morrison appeared behind her, having heard through the faculty grapevine that something unusual was developing. "Miss Mitchell, is there something I can help you with?" Cassandra turned to face him, and Morrison was struck by something different in her demeanor. She had always been one of the quieter faculty members, polite but distant at staff meetings. The woman standing before him now radiated a confidence he had never seen from her before. "Mr. Morrison, I need to use the gymnasium after school today for a demonstration." "What kind of demonstration?" Cassandra chose her words carefully. "A student has expressed interest in learning about boxing techniques. I have some experience in the area, so I offered to provide instruction." Morrison frowned. The request was unusual, but not explicitly against any school policies. "Just you and one student. There may be other students who want to observe. Educational purposes." Something in her tone warned Morrison that this was more complicated than she was letting on. But he had learned over the years that sometimes it was better not to ask too many questions. Just make sure any participants have signed waivers. "Liability issues, you understand?" Cassandra nodded. "Of course." As Morrison walked away, Cassandra pulled out her phone and sent a text to Marcus. "Gymnasium available after school. 3:30 p.m. Bring signed waiver forms for any observers. This is not optional." The message reached Marcus during his AP biology class, where he had been staring at diagrams of cellular mitosis without processing any of the information. His hands shook slightly as he read the text, the reality of what he had committed to settling over him like a suffocating blanket. Tyler noticed his friend's distress. "You okay, man?" Marcus showed him the message, and Tyler's face went pale. "Dude, you can still back out. Nobody would blame you." But Marcus knew that wasn't true. He had built his entire identity around never backing down, never showing weakness, never allowing anyone to challenge his authority without consequences. Backing out now would destroy everything he had spent years constructing. His social media empire, his status at school, his sense of himself as someone who couldn't be intimidated. All of it would crumble if he walked away from this fight. "I'm not backing out," he said, though his voice lacked its usual conviction. Word of the confirmed time and location spread through the school like a virus. By the end of 6th period, hundreds of students knew about the 3:30 appointment in the gymnasium. Some planned to attend, drawn by morbid curiosity and the promise of witnessing either Marcus's triumph or his destruction. Others wanted no part of what they sensed might become genuinely dangerous. The final bell rang at 3:15, and students flooded out of classrooms with unusual urgency. Those heading to the gymnasium moved with purpose, while others hurried toward the exits, wanting to be far away when whatever was about to happen finally occurred. Cassandra spent the 15 minutes between the final bell and the appointed time changing in the faculty restroom. She had brought a simple outfit: black athletic pants, a gray tank top, and boxing shoes that she had purchased that morning from a sporting goods store in town. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. This wasn't Ms. Mitchell, the quiet English teacher. This was someone else entirely, someone she had thought was gone forever. She arrived at the gymnasium at exactly 3:30 to find nearly 200 students already assembled in the bleachers. The turnout was larger than most basketball games, with students streaming in continuously as word continued to spread. Some were recording on their phones, others were placing bets, all of them electric with anticipation. Marcus appeared at the pause cones. Others were placing bets, others were placing bets, all of them electric with anticipation. Marcus appeared at the taste opposite entrance, flanked by Tyler, Jessica, and Devin. He wore basketball shorts and a t-shirt, looking like someone who was about to participate in a casual pickup game rather than face a professional fighter. But his face told a different story: pale, tense, with the haunted expression of someone who had finally bitten off more than he could chew. The gymnasium fell silent as the two main participants faced each other across the polished floor. Cassandra moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable in her own skin, while Marcus stood rigid with nervous energy. "Mr. Wellington," Cassandra said, her voice carrying clearly across the space, "are you certain you want to proceed with this demonstration?" It was his last chance to back down, and everyone in the room knew it. Marcus looked around at the assembled crowd, at the phones recording his every movement, at the faces eager to witness either his triumph or his humiliation, at the friends who had helped him build an empire of cruelty and were now watching it teeter on the edge of collapse. "I'm ready," he said, though his voice cracked slightly on the second word. Cassandra nodded and walked to the equipment area, returning with 2 pairs of boxing gloves. She tossed one pair to Marcus and began lacing up the other, her movements showing the kind of practiced efficiency that came from thousands of repetitions. "These are 16-ounce gloves," she explained as Marcus fumbled with the laces. "Standard training weight. The additional padding will provide some protection, though I should warn you that professional-grade punches can cause significant damage even through heavy gloves." Marcus finally managed to get his gloves on, though his technique was clumsy, and his hands were shaking. Cassandra finished lacing her own gloves in a fraction of the time, the muscle memory of countless training sessions making the process automatic. She walked to the center of the makeshift ring they had created, bouncing lightly on her toes. The movement was subtle, but students familiar with boxing recognized it immediately. This was how professional fighters moved, with the kind of controlled energy that could explode into violence at any moment. Marcus joined her in the center, his movements awkward and uncertain. Standing next to Cassandra, the difference in their preparation was obvious to everyone watching. She looked like exactly what she was: a trained killer who had spent years perfecting the art of controlled combat. He looked exactly like he was a spoiled teenager who had finally encountered a problem that his father's money couldn't solve. "Final chance to reconsider, Mr. Wellington," Cassandra said quietly, though her words carried to every corner of the silent gymnasium. Marcus shook his head. Though whether from determination or terror was unclear, Cassandra smiled, and it was the same predatory expression she had worn in professional rings across 3 states. "Then let's begin your education." The gymnasium had transformed into something resembling a gladiatorial arena. 200 students packed the bleachers, their phones held high like modern torches, capturing every angle of what was about to unfold. The air thrummed with nervous energy as Cassandra and Marcus faced each other in the center of the improvised ring. The stark difference in their preparations obvious to everyone watching, Cassandra moved with the measured confidence of someone returning to familiar territory. She rolled her shoulders, loosening muscles that remembered this ritual even after 15 years away from competition. Her breathing was controlled, her stance natural, her eyes already studying Marcus with the cold assessment of a predator evaluating prey. Marcus, by contrast, looked like someone who had stumbled into the wrong movie. His gloves hung awkwardly at his sides. His weight shifted nervously from foot to foot, and his face had taken on a sickly pallor that made his usual confidence seem like a distant memory. "Since this is an educational demonstration," Cassandra announced, her voice carrying clearly across the silent gymnasium, "I'll explain what's happening as we proceed. Mr. Wellington has requested instruction in boxing fundamentals. So we'll start with basic defensive positioning." She moved closer to Marcus, and he instinctively took a step backward. The crowd murmured at this display of obvious intimidation, phones capturing every moment of his retreat. "Notice how Mr. Wellington's natural instinct is to back away from pressure," Cassandra continued in the same conversational tone she used when discussing literature. "This is a common mistake among untrained fighters. Backward movement limits your options and telegraphs fear to your opponent." Without warning, she threw a lightning-fast jab that stopped inches from Marcus's nose. The speed was inhuman, so fast that several students gasped audibly, and Marcus jerked backward so violently that he nearly lost his balance. "That was a basic jab thrown at approximately 40% speed," Cassandra explained, as if she hadn't just demonstrated the ability to knock Marcus unconscious with minimal effort. In a professional bout, that punch would have traveled the remaining distance and likely ended the encounter immediately. Marcus tried to find his voice. "I thought we were just going to spar lightly." "Mr. Wellington," Cassandra interrupted, "you challenged me to demonstrate my boxing skills. You insisted that I prove I wasn't all talk. This is what you requested." She began to circle him again, the same predatory movement she had used in the hallway the day before. Marcus turned to track her movement, but his footwork was clumsy, uncoordinated. Every step betrayed his complete lack of training. "Lesson 2, ring awareness," Cassandra continued. "Notice how Mr. Wellington is focusing entirely on my position, while ignoring his own. He's moving directly toward the wall, limiting his escape routes." Indeed, Marcus had backed himself almost to the edge of their makeshift ring, the gymnasium wall only feet behind him. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something decisive was about to happen. "Please demonstrate your defensive stance, Mr. Wellington," Cassandra instructed. Marcus raised his gloves uncertainly, holding them too high and too wide, leaving his body completely exposed. Cassandra shook her head with what might have been disappointment or amusement. "This is why proper training is essential," she told the audience. "Mr. Wellington believes he's protecting himself, but his guard is full of openings, for instance." She moved forward with fluid grace and tapped Marcus lightly on the ribs with her left glove. The contact was gentle, but the message was clear. She could have hit him with devastating force anywhere she chose. "Liver shot," she explained clinically. "One of the most effective body punches in boxing. Properly executed, it causes immediate incapacitation, regardless of an opponent's size or conditioning." Marcus dropped his hand slightly, trying to protect his body, and Cassandra immediately tapped him on the forehead with her right glove. And now the head is unprotected. This is the fundamental problem with untrained fighters. They cannot maintain proper defensive positioning under pressure. The psychological warfare was masterful. Cassandra wasn't just demonstrating superior technique. She was systematically dismantling Marcus's confidence, showing everyone in the gymnasium that he was completely outclassed. Each gentle tap was a reminder that she could end this confrontation whenever she chose. "Perhaps Mr. Wellington would like to demonstrate offensive technique?" Cassandra suggested, backing away slightly to give him room. Marcus seized the opportunity, swinging a wild overhand right that missed Cassandra by at least 2 feet. She didn't even need to duck. Simply shifting her weight slightly was enough to avoid the clumsy attack entirely. Telegraphed from approximately 3 seconds away, she observed. Notice how Mr. Wellington's entire body language announced his intention long before he committed to the punch. This is why training focuses heavily on concealing offensive intentions until the moment of execution. Marcus tried again, throwing a left hook that was even wider and slower than his first attempt. Cassandra caught his gloved hand easily, holding it in place while she provided commentary. Poor hip rotation, no weight transfer, arm punching instead of using the entire kinetic chain. This punch would have no power even if it connected, which it wouldn't against any trained opponent. She released his hand and stepped back, allowing Marcus to regain his balance. The humiliation was complete. She had just caught his punch like someone might catch a ball thrown by a small child. The crowd was absolutely silent now, mesmerized by the clinical destruction of someone they had viewed as untouchable. Phones continued recording, capturing every moment of Marcus Wellington's education in the difference between bullying and actual fighting. "Now," Cassandra said, her voice taking on a different tone, "let me show you what 15 years of professional training looks like." What happened next would be analyzed and replayed thousands of times across social media platforms, but no amount of slow-motion replay could fully capture the artistry of what Cassandra demonstrated. She threw a combination that lasted exactly 2 seconds, a jab to establish distance, a cross to the body, a left hook to the head, and an uppercut that stopped just short of Marcus's chin. The speed was inhuman. The precision was surgical. And the control was absolute. 4 punches that could have hospitalized Marcus, delivered with such restraint that they barely displaced the air around his head. Marcus stood frozen, understanding finally and completely that he was facing someone who operated on a different level entirely. The combination had been thrown so fast that he hadn't even had time to flinch, much less defend himself. "That," Cassandra said, breathing normally despite the explosive movement, "was a basic 4-punch combination thrown at competition speed. Mr. Wellington, you may notice that you're still conscious. This is because I chose not to make contact. In a professional bout, that choice would not be available to you." Marcus's legs gave out. He didn't fall dramatically, just sank slowly to his knees as the full reality of his situation overwhelmed him. The arrogant bully who had terrorized students and teachers for years was kneeling in the center of the gymnasium, psychologically broken by a demonstration of skill so far beyond his comprehension that he couldn't even process it. "Lesson complete," Cassandra announced, beginning to unlace her gloves. "I trust this has been educational for everyone involved." The silence in the gymnasium was deafening. 200 students sat motionless, their phones still recording, trying to process what they had just witnessed. This wasn't the violent confrontation many had expected. It was something far more devastating. It was the complete and utter humiliation of someone who had built his entire identity around intimidating others. Cassandra walked over to Marcus, who was still kneeling on the floor, and offered him her hand to help him up. The gesture was simple, almost gentle, but it carried the weight of absolute victory. "Mr. Wellington," she said quietly, "I hope you've learned something valuable today about the difference between being a bully and being truly dangerous. One requires only cruelty and opportunity. The other requires dedication, discipline, and respect for the power you wield." Marcus accepted her help, standing up, his face a mask of shock and something that might have been the beginning of genuine humility. The swagger was gone, the arrogance had evaporated, and what remained was a 17-year-old boy who had just learned that the world contained forces he couldn't control or intimidate. As the crowd began to disperse, phones already uploading videos that would make Lightning Rodriguez's return to public attention go viral within hours, Cassandra packed up the boxing equipment with the same methodical precision she brought to grading papers. The quiet English teacher had returned to Riverside High School, but everyone who witnessed that afternoon would remember that beneath her cardigan and sensible shoes lived someone far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. The aftermath of the gymnasium demonstration rippled through Riverside High School and beyond like an earthquake whose tremors would be felt for months to come. Within hours, videos of Cassandra's masterful display had exploded across every social media platform imaginable. The hashtag Lightning Rodriguez went viral nationally, with boxing enthusiasts, educators, and anti-bullying advocates sharing the footage, alongside commentary that ranged from amazed to analytical to downright reverent. ESPN picked up the story by Thursday morning, featuring a segment about the teacher who knocked out bullying without throwing a punch. Sports Illustrated ran an online article titled "The Quiet Storm: How Lightning Rodriguez Became an English Teacher." Boxing forums erupted with discussions about her technique, her restraint, and speculation about what might have happened if she had competed for a few more years before retiring. But the most significant changes were happening within the walls of Riverside High School itself. Marcus Wellington didn't return to school on Thursday. His Camaro sat absent from the parking lot where it had been a daily symbol of his dominance. Students whispered that he had been seen at his father's car dealership, helping with inventory and keeping his head down. The social media empire that had terrorized classmates and teachers for 2 years went silent. No new posts, no humiliation content, no viral attempts at maintaining relevance. Tyler Brooks found himself in an unexpected position. Without Marcus's leadership, he became the de facto keeper of the deleted videos and the institutional memory of their harassment campaigns. But instead of trying to continue the operation, he made a decision that surprised everyone. He approached Principal Henderson with a full confession and a hard drive containing every video they had ever made. "I want to make this right," he told Henderson during a meeting that lasted 3 hours and resulted in a comprehensive plan for restorative justice that would involve every student who had been victimized by their content. Jessica Hartwell underwent her own transformation. Stripped of her role as Marcus's verbal assassin, she discovered that her sharp wit could be used constructively. She joined the school's debate team and found that dismantling arguments was far more satisfying than dismantling people. Devin Pierce, perhaps the most straightforward of the group, simply transferred schools. His parents, horrified by their son's involvement in systematic harassment, enrolled him in a private military academy 2 states away, where his size and aggression could be channeled into more productive outlets. The ripple effects extended beyond Marcus's immediate circle. Students who had been victims of their campaigns found themselves suddenly free from the oppression they had endured for years. Teachers noticed an immediate shift in classroom dynamics: less fear, more engagement, a sense that the toxic atmosphere that had poisoned social interactions was finally beginning to clear. Cassandra herself became something of a reluctant celebrity within the education community. She received interview requests from news outlets, speaking invitations from anti-bullying organizations, and offers from publishers interested in her story. She declined most of them, preferring to return to the quiet routine of teaching literature and grading papers. But Room 237 was no longer the isolated sanctuary it had once been. Students who had never spoken to her began stopping by during lunch breaks, not to cause trouble, but to ask questions about literature, about life, about how to handle difficult situations with dignity and strength. She found herself becoming the teacher she had always wanted to be, not invisible, but genuinely respected. The boxing equipment in the gymnasium was officially restored to active use, with Cassandra volunteering to supervise an after-school program for students interested in learning the sport properly. The first meeting drew over 30 participants, including several who had been victims of Marcus's harassment and wanted to learn how to protect themselves. Boxing, she told her first class, is not about hurting people. It's about discipline, respect, and understanding your own capabilities. It's about knowing that you have power and choosing how to use it responsibly. The lessons were popular not just for the physical training, but for the philosophy behind them. Cassandra taught her students that true strength came from restraint, that real power was knowing when not to use your abilities, and that the most devastating victory was often the one that left your opponent with their dignity intact. Marcus eventually returned to school the following Monday, but he was a fundamentally different person. The swagger was gone, replaced by something that looked suspiciously like humility. He kept his head down, completed his assignments without complaint, and seemed to be processing lessons that extended far beyond anything taught in textbooks. That the transformation wasn't immediate or complete. Years of entitlement and cruelty couldn't be erased by a single afternoon, no matter how profound. But the foundation had been shaken, the certainties had been challenged, and for the first time in his life, Marcus Wellington was forced to confront the possibility that he might not be the most important person in any given room. His father, Robert Wellington, had initially threatened lawsuits and demanded meetings with the school board. But as the story gained national attention and public opinion overwhelmingly supported Cassandra's actions, he quietly withdrew his complaints. The family's donations to the athletic program continued, but the implicit understanding that Marcus was untouchable disappeared entirely. The most significant change, however, was in the culture of the school itself. The reign of terror that had characterized Marcus's social media empire had created an atmosphere where cruelty was normalized, where humiliation was entertainment, and where victims had no recourse against those with power and influence. That atmosphere evaporated virtually overnight. Students began standing up to bullies, knowing that authority figures like Cassandra would support them. Teachers felt empowered to address harassment more directly, understanding that the administration would back them up when they took action. The toxic ecosystem that had allowed systematic cruelty to flourish was replaced by something healthier, not perfect, but fundamentally changed. Cassandra's story became required reading in education programs across the country. Not because she had used violence to solve a problem, but because she had used the mere demonstration of capability to achieve what years of traditional disciplinary action had failed to accomplish. She had shown that sometimes the threat of consequences was more powerful than the consequences themselves. The boxing program flourished under her guidance, producing students who understood that physical capability came with moral responsibility. Several went on to compete at state levels, but all carried with them lessons about respect, discipline, and the proper use of power that extended far beyond athletics. Years later, Marcus Wellington would become a successful businessperson who was known for his fair treatment of employees and his zero-tolerance policy toward workplace harassment. The lesson he learned in that gymnasium, that true power comes from restraint, not aggression, shaped every interaction he had for the rest of his life. Tyler Brooks became a documentary filmmaker who specialized in stories about redemption and second chances. His senior project was a film about restorative justice that featured interviews with every student who had been victimized by their harassment campaigns, along with his own unflinching examination of how ordinary people could become complicit in systematic cruelty. And Cassandra Mitchell continued teaching English in room 237, no longer invisible, but no longer needing to be. She had found the balance between Lightning Rodriguez and Miss Mitchell strong enough to protect those who needed protection, wise enough to know when strength wasn't the answer, and confident enough to be exactly who she needed to be in any given moment. The faded boxing hoodie hung in her closet at home now, a reminder of who she had been and who she still was underneath the cardigans and lesson plans. She didn't need to wear it anymore to remember her strength, and she didn't need to hide it anymore to feel safe. The quiet English teacher who had once eaten lunch alone had become something far more powerful, a protector, a mentor, and a living reminder that respect isn't something you demand, It's something you earn through your actions, your choices, and your willingness to stand up for what's right when it matters most. In the end, Marcus Wellington had gotten exactly what he asked. 4. A demonstration of Lightning Rodriguez's boxing skills. But the lesson he learned had nothing to do with throwing punches and everything to do with the difference between being feared and being respected, between having power over others and having power over yourself. And that lesson, Cassandra knew, was worth more than any championship belt she had ever been offered. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.